はい。今日は皆さんお集まりいただきありがとうございます。今から第96回、公開研究会、COVID 時代以降の FD と学習空間、海外からの教訓ということで、パリデジタル大学のジョン・オージェリ先生から、お話をいただきます。すいません。ビデオがオフになってました。私は、最初だけちょっと今、進行役を務めていますが、高等教育センターの松下と申します。どうぞよろしくお願いします。で、今日はですね、EUC 先生の方で、司会を務めてくださることになっています。で、大体、大体1時間くらいを講演に当てて、あとの1時間くらいを質疑応答に当てたいと思ってますが、前半と後半で、1時間ずつ区切るというよりは、適宜、間で、質疑応答の時間を設けながら進めたいと思っています。あと、チャットにもですね、ぜひ、質問、ご意見の書き込みをお願いします。日本語でも結構ですので、ゆう先生の方で適宜、翻訳してくださるとありがたいですが、日本語で結構ですので、どうぞ、どしどし、ご意見を書き込みください。では、ゆう先生、バトンタッチします。
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Tori Yoshi at Kyoto University. And we're so delighted to have John Augeri sensei from Ile-de-France Digital University. And he's currently at Kyoto University. And he is at 学術情報 Media Center, Academic Center for the Media Information.
Computing and Media Studies.
Thank you. You know better than we are. We know. But anyway, and this is not the first visit from Augeri sensei to Kyoto University. And but we always enjoy the collegialship with him. And he has been giving a number of talks here and there around the world, been working closely with EDUCOurse, that's Academic Technology Alliance associations in North America. And personally, I think I've known Augeri sensei for several years. And he's been very active in participating and giving talk at many conferences in the realm of academic technology. So, and I understand that his specialty is learning space and online education and so on. But today, of course, everybody is under burden, or under pressure, of COVID-19. And so we're delighted to learn from Augeri sensei about so what's going on at his digital university, in France. And also some related, some topics and how, what we're gonna face in terms of the, so-called post-pandemic, higher education. And we also are looking forward, of course, getting some good questions, from you. And please feel free to start posting, your questions on the chat thread in Zoom. And so after his talk, probably for 1 hour, so. We hope to have some vibrant discussion with Augeri sensei. Okay, without further ado, welcome Augeri sensei. The virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Okay, 皆様おはようございます。John Augeri です。よろしくお願いいたします。So first of all, I would like to apologize to give this talk in English, but as Yoshi-sensei perfectly knows, I always promise that my Japanese proficiency will improve year to year, but it's improving more slowly than I would like to. So I'm very sorry, but I will have to give this new speech indeed this year in English again. But considering that I have still some French accent remaining when I'm speaking English, maybe it should be easier for you to understand. So, Yoshi-sensei, dear Toru, Matsushita-sensei, dear Kayo, thank you very much for organizing that seminar. It's really my pleasure, as usual, I would say, because indeed it's not the first time I'm giving such kind of talk at Kyodai, but it's really my pleasure to have such kind of moments to share ideas, challenges, issues, and perspectives. And I think that considering the times we are going through, it's more important than ever to have such kind of discussions. So I would like also to send some greetings to many of the attendees. I saw the list of people that registered for today's talk, and I saw many familiar names, so I'm very delighted to see so many old friends joining that talk, and I'm looking forward for the exchanges that we're going to have at the during the second hour. So indeed, you have here my my details, but I will give you them once again at the end of the talk. And as Yoshi-sensei mentioned, I'm belonging to an institution which is called Ile-de-France Digital University, that actually I co-created now 16 years ago, 2005, yeah, 16, soon 17 years ago. Actually, at the time, we created that digital university, which is actually a consortium. It's a consortium of 25 universities in Paris area. It was a government project at that time. I was actually working at the Furansu no Monkasho. I was in charge of different programs for educational technologies in the higher education, and I was appointed to create that consortium for all universities in Paris. I will go back on the higher education system in France, but actually all universities in France are national. So it's very usual to have mutualization between all universities, and one of the purposes of this digital university is clearly to do mutualization, sharing between all universities of Paris area. I have indeed two core focuses in my duties in this consortium, which are the faculty development. Actually, I'm a director of a region-wide faculty development initiative that we will talk about quite extensively in a few minutes. And I'm also conducting research on learning spaces, which will be our second topic for today since now 2016. So yeah, faculty development since 2009 and learning spaces since 2016. I also would like to mention that in my activities in that digital universities, I'm very delighted to have wonderful collaborations with foreign universities, foreign institutions. I will go back, as Yoshi-sensei mentioned, I will go back a couple of times on EDUCAUSE, which is always something important to talk about when you are dealing with educational technologies. But I have obviously a very special connection with Japan, and many of you know that. And I've been very fortunate and very happy to have research stays in those different institutions. So indeed, it's the second time I'm having a stay at Kyoto University. First time was in 2017 about my learning spaces research. This time we are conducting a French-Japanese comparative study of the pandemic impact on the teaching and learning practices. So second time I'm coming to Kyodai, and it's always the same pleasure, of course. I would like also to mention, because I know that I have some of my fellow colleagues in the virtual room today, I would like to mention the previous stay I had, which was in Sofia University in 2019, was a wonderful stay, and I would like to send a friendly greeting to Sugimoto-san, Tamura-sensei, and Horikoshi-sensei that I've been very happy to work with, also about learning spaces in 2019. There was also Todai and Meiji, I think I didn't see any people attending. I hope I'm not wrong, but once again, it's also thanks to all those universities that I can give that speech today, because it's been a very nice way to get to collect information and to share experiences. So first topic of today, faculty development. Faculty development, and I would like to deal with that topic through an angle which will be that question from emergency measures to a sustainable change. There is no need to say that, considering the conditions we have faced since now approximately 1 year all across the globe, faculty development became more essential than ever. I was saying before that exchanges became more essential than ever, but among those exchanges, I think that faculty development has a very, very special position. As I told you a couple of minutes ago, this is something I'm doing in Paris since 2009. We have this region-wide faculty development initiative that we are running for the 25 universities of our consortium. And this is the example I would like to discuss. To begin with, I would like to discuss that example to give you the way we have been through the pandemic in France and in Paris with that very faculty development initiative. So let me first give you some facts and figures about the old normal. What was finally this faculty development initiative before the COVID? As I told you, it started actually in September 2009, so it's not something very new. It's a 11 years old initiative. And once again, it's region-wide. So it's covering the entire region of Paris. If I made a comparison with the Japanese system, we could call that a prefecture. So basically, it's covering what could be a prefecture of Tokyo, for instance. It's since the beginning, this faculty development initiative was entirely built on face-to-face sessions. And this is not something we absolutely wanted to keep on our point of view, and especially on my point of view. It could be pretty normal to ask me the questions, okay, you are digital university, but you are only conducting face-to-face faculty development session. And that would be a very right question. And actually, I've been suggesting many times to our attendees since 2009 to switch some of our sessions online, but it was really a request from our faculties to keep them face-to-face because they felt more confident, they felt that the support was different, maybe more closer when they were face-to-face, and this is something I can understand. So basically, since 2009, all of our faculty development sessions were delivered face-to-face. So for that, we are using 5 training centers that are, we built them only for the purpose of the faculty development initiative I'm talking about now. And they are spread all across the region of Paris, the prefecture of Paris, once again, to take a Japanese comparison. And those training centers are designed as active learning classrooms and learning commons for some of them. So to give you a snapshot, they look like this. So it's definitely not typical classrooms. We really want to put our faculties in conditions that are collaborative, that are enhancing the group working activities. So we are using such kind of facilities to deliver our faculty development sessions. Second very important component of that initiative is a website that we have since the very beginning. So this is a website that can be accessed by all universities of Paris area. People are using the same login and password than usual. They're using the login password from their own university and they can access to that website. So please don't try to read, it's entirely in French, but they have the catalog of the training sessions, of the faculty development training sessions, and they can register online. It's completely paperless. So about that website, I might say, after having using it during 11 years, I might say that maybe it has 3 key assets. First, as I said, it's a single sign-on, so the people that don't have to get a second password, second login to access that. They use the usual university login password, so it's very simple. It's completely integrated in the process of all universities. What I mean is that after they make the registration on that website to our digital university, there is an internal workflow that makes that request of registration to be sent in the responsible service of their own university. So they have nothing else to do than registering on that website. And as I said, it's completely paperless. Nothing to sign, nothing. It's completely paperless. It's completely seamless. It's very, very easy to use. So I do think that this is the kind of thing that the people really appreciate in that way to do the registrations. To continue about the old normal and the ways our sessions were delivered until the COVID time, I would like to foster on this, which is a very basic philosophy that we applied to our sessions since the very beginning. We really wanted, so of course we are dealing with digital tools, of course, but really wanted to deal with the synergy, with the complementarity between digital tool and teaching and learning practices. We had, and especially I had, no interest in giving lessons, in giving sessions to faculties just to know how to click on a software. My purpose is definitely to enhance the teaching and learning practices. So really wanted since the very beginning to make the connections between those two topics. And to give you some examples of how we can translate this, this goal of having a synergy. For instance, we have sessions about designing slideshows. That's pretty obvious. So people can choose sessions that are focused on using PowerPoint, Keynote, Google Slide, Prezi. We have some others examples, but these are a few of them. So they can say, okay, I'm going to pick up a session on Keynote because I want to make my slideshow on Keynote. Okay, so he or she is going to register to this session on the software, but we will ask that faculty to also register to a practice, really pedagogical practice session, which is called Visual Design Principles of the Slideshow, which will explain to that very faculty why a slideshow is working or not, how to use the illustrations, how to use text, how to make the sequence of the slides, how to have a rhythm in the slideshow. So really one key example of this complementarity between the digital tool and the practice. People want to use video editing software. Okay, that's fine, but we're gonna ask them to follow something about the production of pedagogical screencasts, for instance. Commented video caption of the screens, which are very useful nowadays considering the situations we are teaching. Mind mapping software. Mind mapping is getting very trendy in our faculty. So we say, okay, we're gonna teach you how to use a mind mapping software, but we also will explain you how to use it in a collaborative activities with your students. So it's always definitely this complementarity between digital tool and teaching and learning practices, always two sessions working together. Beside that, something else that is also very important, we wanted to keep the session short, 2 to 3 hours. We know that our faculties are very busy, so we wanted really to make them able to follow as much as they can those sessions, so we have to keep them short, 2 to 3 hours. Also, and this is very, very important, we wanted to keep an individual approach. I will go back to that topic later about the kind of interactivity we can have in the faculty development, especially when it's online. But when it's face-to-face, for us, is the same thing. We really want to have personalized support. We never let people work by themselves. They always have support. It's a very individual approach. And that's the reason why we have a limit on purpose to 10 to 12 attendees per session. So it's really on purpose because we want to have this individual approach. So to finish with that all normal, I would like to give you some numbers of how it's been doing since 2009. We collected something like 11,000 registrations. We scheduled something like 1,100 sessions, covered 100 topics approximately, and it's been involving 45 institutions. So not only the institutions that are belonging to our consortiums, but some other ones too outside of our consortiums, and especially through the international partnerships, international collaborations I was mentioning during my introduction. we have been very happy to give some of those faculty development sessions to partners universities all across the globe, as you may see in Canada, USA, Japan, of course, Singapore, Australia as well. So that was the old normal until March 2020. Let's now talk about the pandemic response. So first, and this is a discussion that I had with Matsushita Sensei when we were preparing that session. I think, and we think actually it's very useful that you get an overlook on the situation that was the one we experienced in France considering the COVID. So everything, as you may know, started in March 2020. And first, I'm sure you heard that through the media in Japan, I would like to remind that we had 2 complete lockdowns in France. The first one was from March 17 to May 11th, so 2 months. The second one was at the end of the year from late October to mid-December. So these were complete lockdowns, especially the first one. The first one was very, very strict, to be honest with you. At that time, I was in Paris. Actually, I came back from my stay at Sophia University just a few weeks before, in February. The first lockdown started in Paris on March 17. And to be honest with you, so this is a personal point of view, which is going beyond our discussion on about faculty development, but I've never seen Paris like this. Honestly, it was completely empty. The streets were completely empty during the entire day. The only reason to go out was to go to the supermarket to buy something to eat, but that's it. So nothing, no schools open, no companies running, nothing except the essential ones, but very strict lockdown. The second one was a little bit softer, but of course, all this had an impact on universities, on campuses. And especially, I would like to mention that President Macron, when the first lockdown was declared in March 17, first that lockdown was scheduled for 2 weeks, and finally it lasted 8 weeks, as I said, up to May 11th. But since the very beginning, President Macron said that the campuses of all French universities, because once again, we have a 100% national university system. So President Macron said that the campuses would be closed until September, which is the back to school for us. So as soon as the first lockdown started in March, we knew that the campuses would be closed for 6 months, even though the lockdown would finish earlier. So after that, we had from September to mid-October, we have a very partial hybrid high flex period. We have very few groups of students being able to go back on the campuses because the pandemic situation was a little bit improving. And after that, of course, we had the second lockdown and the campuses were closed again up to February. Actually, they reopened very partially once again since February 1st, and very, very partially. So, of course, this was a huge, huge impact for the campuses. I have also to mention that those closure times of the campuses were covering the period of the final exams in June, of course. And we had the academic year beginning, which in Europe is in September. That was just at the time of the very partial hybrid high flex period. But of course, it was very, very complicated as well because it wasn't at all a normal access to the campuses in France. How about the faculty development response that we're going to talk from now on? We very quickly decided to set up a continuity plan as soon as the first lockdown was declared. So this is something I will explain you from now on. And after that, from September, we decided to think about a sustainability plan. So these are 2 steps I would like now to discuss. First, March 2020, first lockdown is declared, we decide to do a continuity plan. What do I mean by that? Once again, in the old normal, all of our faculty development sessions were given face-to-face. You remember that I was explaining a few minutes ago. So the choice was very simple for us, whether we said, okay, we wait for the campuses to reopen, to have access to our training centers and to restart our faculty development sessions. But as I said, President Macron said that the campuses would be closed during 6 months. And we perfectly knew that during those 6 months, considering the switch to online teaching for all of the faculties, the needs for faculty development was absolutely gigantic. So there was no way to say, okay, we just wait. We shut down our faculty development because it's face-to-face and we wait for the reopening of the campuses. That was no way to think like that. So very quickly, we decided to set up a continuity plan. So to give you an overlook very quickly of how it works, first, let's go back to the basics of the old normal that I just explained. We had two aspects to deal with. First, we had to adapt the program. We had to create new sessions, especially designed to cover the topic of online learning, online teaching and learning, much more than we did before, because that was the majority of the needs. And there were some other needs that we were delivering face-to-face that were not so relevant and not so urgent anymore, but we really needed to do something very special, a huge effort for all the topics covering online teaching. Second, about the sessions themselves, we had to adapt the content to the new delivery format that was online as well. We were talking about online teaching, but we were also about to give our own faculty development sessions online, same format. In French, maybe some of you know that we talk about le fond, which means what we are talking about. So this is adapting the program, and la forme, which is the way we talk about that program. So delivering those sessions online. So to say that in other words, we had to fit the new needs and we had to make those sessions suitable and interactive to be delivered online. So how did it work? As I said, the first lockdown was declared on March 17, all universities, campuses closing. 1 week later, we decided to conduct some first tests on the technical and on the pedagogical point of view. I insist on the pedagogical point of view because once again, we really wanted to adapt our contents to the new delivering format. 1 week later, we did a first test in live conditions with real faculties that we invited them. We said, okay, we're going to try a very new format of delivering of our faculty development session. It's going to be online, please attend. So it was a real life condition test, April 2nd. And at that time, it was good enough to know that we could transpose 25% of the old program of sessions to online. We worked a lot during April, and actually after those 2 weeks of switch, we continued to improve what we were doing. And at the end of the April, we could publish publicly an entire program online, new faculty development sessions program entirely delivered online on April 28. And actually, finally, we could transpose 60% of the old sessions to which we added new topics that were dealing to the online teaching that was so important at that time. Let's now move to the production phase. First, we scheduled 21 sessions. We had 170 seats, if I may say, 15 topics covered. And what you're going to see are the real numbers. So this curve is really reflecting the real numbers of registrations. As you may see, the answer was very important. We had to make a first extension of the program on May 13th. So 2 weeks later, 2 weeks after the beginning, first extension, we moved to 30 sessions, so 50% of the extension. Once again, answer was very huge. The needs were very important, of course. Second extension of the capacity, second extension of the program, beginning of June. And once again, the answer was very important. So definitely, it was pretty obvious, but we could verify that the needs for those faculty development sessions were very important. And at the end of this continuity plan that was lasting from April to early July, so 3 months, we registered a little bit less than 300 attendees on 35 sessions coming from 10 universities. So that was something that we could set up very quickly. And I think it was a very good experience to move to the sustainability plan I would like to discuss now. Because from September 2020, even though some campuses were going back to a partial hybrid and high flex configuration, as I said, we perfectly knew that the needs were still very important, very, very important. And we also, I would like really to mention that, acknowledge very quickly that these online faculty development sessions would not last only at the pandemic time. We very quickly understood that it would last on the middle or the long term. And the experience that we had during the continuity plan of 3 months was good enough to think, okay, maybe we can make them sustainable. So this sustainability plan was basically built on one key concept, that was to deliver one full, extensive course that was called Teaching with Digital. Okay, so instead of proposing to our faculties to pick up sessions as they wanted, we said, okay, now we have one full course. It's a package. It's entirely designed for your needs. And we really recommend you to follow that course entirely. So it's a 10 modules course. It's covering first the concepts and basics, fundamentals about the online and hybrid learning, how to design what we call the learning capsule, the assessment online. Production of contents, we help them to design efficient slideshows. We help them to produce video caption of the screencast, as we call them. Video production with very light devices, such as the smartphone camera. Tools for interactivity, and how do we manage the collaboration in a distance configuration. And we also deliver the modules about the class activity design and the articulation with physical spaces when some people could access them in hybrid or high flex configuration. So we really foster on that concept to say, okay, before you could pick up as you wanted, you still can pick up as you want. People could pick up among those modules as they wanted, but we really recommended them to follow the entire course. And actually, it really made a difference, because people had a sort of guidance. People really didn't have to care, okay, is it relevant for me or not? They just had to follow that sequence. So most of them really decided to follow the entire course. And to give you the evolution of the numbers, these were the ones we had after the continuity plan between April and July. And so this is what we had in September 2020. And after this, the launch of this packaged course that I just presented, we moved to 800 registration, 85 sessions organized, and 17 universities sending people to this course. So these were the numbers we had just 4 months later in January 2021. So the answer was absolutely, absolutely huge. But beyond the numbers, of course, and considering that it was a very new way for us to deliver faculty development, we wanted to make some evaluations, of course. And that was systematic. After all of the sessions we had, we sent a quick form to our attendees, and we were asking 4 questions. First one, what did you think about the answer to the needs? And 80% of the people said that it was good. The sessions given as they were a good answer to their needs. Appreciation of the contents, 83% positive opinion. Appreciation of the speaker, 89% of the people think that it was a positive. So this was pretty the same. These were pretty the same numbers than the ones we had at the time of the face-to-face sessions. So that was not so surprising. But of course, the key question for us was the last one. What did you think about the new video conferencing format we used to deliver those faculty development sessions? And we were very happy to see that 96% of the people had a good appreciation of that. This was a huge concern for us, that some people would say, okay, finally video conferencing, it's just a plan B. It's just an alternative to the faculty development sessions that we always had face-to-face. And finally, now people said, okay, it's online, that it might be very good. And one of the reasons why maybe we had this good appreciation was that we really wanted to keep the people always active. As I told you, we made those sessions in very small groups when it was face-to-face, 10 to 12 people. We kept the same capacity online because we really wanted to have this individual approach to all people attending the sessions. And practically speaking, it means that the interactions are very, very frequent, even online. And practically speaking, it means that there are never more than 10 minutes without attendees doing anything. Okay, so at least once every 10 minutes, there is one activity with the attendees. It's very, very interactive. Second thing, we did something that we called asymmetric interactive video conferencing. What do I mean by that? I mean that the people running the sessions are using a laptop, but also a second screen, which will be used only for the chats. To give you the way it's working, the speaker is actually delivering his or her session by video conferencing, of course. So he or she is speaking, sharing the screen, exactly what I'm doing right now. But we ask the attendees to interact with us first by chats. And actually, we have on the speaker side, we have a double connection to the video conferencing system. First with the laptop in which the video conferencing is running and in which the slideshow is shared. But the second screen is only used for chats. So we always can keep an eye on the second screen and receiving the questions from the attendees live, and we can answer directly without any delay. And this is much more efficient than turning on microphone, waiting that the microphone is online and people, can you hear me? Kikoemasu? No, okay, you just type your question by chat and it's very quick. It doesn't mean that after that we don't have exchanges by voice, but the first level of questions definitely is by chat, and this is very, very seamless. And I think it's a key point that led us to have this 96% of good appreciations. People said, once again, these are some genuine testimonies that we had. It allows to ask a maximum of questions, seamless, is very suitable. So people, they really enjoyed that. So this was the pandemic's response. And I would like now to finish this first part about faculty development by discussing, of course, about the new normal. What shall we do in the middle and on the long term? So first, I think we learned a lot from this period. We are still in this difficult period, of course, but we already learned a lot. We had a lot of lessons, we had a lot of assessment from the pandemic time. And considering what we did, switching our entire faculty development initiative online, we wanted to list the cons and the pros. So first, on the cons, we could have been worrying about technical issues. I have to tell you that within the 800 attendees we had last year, we had less than 10 people that couldn't attend the session because they had technical issues. So this doesn't seem to be a problem, okay? Incompatibilities, what do I mean by that? We have few topics that we were delivering face-to-face that we couldn't deliver yet online because on the pedagogical point of view, it's not reasonable. For instance, when you have very specific software that needs you to have the trainer just next to you, it might be difficult to switch them to online. So once again, we wanted to deliver only super high quality online sessions. So if some topics are not completely suitable to switch online, so far we keep them on the side, still working on them, but still on waiting. But on the pros, we had this interactivity I was just talking about. And basically people said, okay, online, it's not only a plan B, it can be very, very nice, and it can be as good as face-to-face sessions. I'm not making an opposition between face-to-face to online. I'm just saying that online can be as good as face-to-face for some topics. And lastly, in the good points, agility. What do I mean by that? I mean that when you deliver face-to-face sessions, you have a lot of logistics to take care about. Booking the room, having people coming, taking the train, and blah, blah, blah. When you have online sessions, it's very easy, and this is something we experience. We completely experience that to say, okay, today we had the module about the designing learning capsules. but people ask to get some precisions. Okay, we really quickly organize a Q&A and a workshop sessions that will be settled, I don't know, the next day or 2 days later. And because it's online, it's very easy. There is no logistics. Same thing, I was giving many times a session about the slideshow design. People told me, we would like to practice more. Okay, let's meet tomorrow at lunchtime and we're going to do a workshop together. So we had a huge reactivity that was possible because of these online formats. And beyond having this reactivity on the course we already proposed, which is the famous teaching with digital course I'm talking about now, we could also thinking about create other courses. And especially, I can announce you that we're going to launch a Learning Spaces course from next September, actually, which is pretty dense, as you may see, 14 modules. And it's going to talk first about the concept and the basics for the stakeholders, presidents, vice presidents, deans of universities that are thinking about funding some learning spaces on the campuses. We will give them the basics, the international trends, the methodologies, the assessment systems. The design itself of the learning spaces, these sessions will be delivered for the project managers, project leaders, how to design active learning classrooms, collaborative lecture theaters, learning commons, transitional spaces, acoustics, all the things to design. And finally, for the faculties themselves, we will give sessions about the way to use those learning spaces. We anticipate the moment we will be able to go back fully on the campuses, and we will discuss with them about the teaching practices they may have on those very learning spaces. So this agility that we have allows us to deliver, not only have a flexibility in the way we deliver the teaching with digital course, but to create new courses very easily. So that's the first lesson. Second lesson, I think like me, most of you really acknowledge that we moved much more than before to teaching scenarios that are mixing synchronous and asynchronous times. I will give you right here a very synthetic example of what could be such kind of pedagogical scenario in which we have synchronous times and asynchronous times. So live and people working by themselves. So for instance, in 5 steps, we could have a lecture synchronous that is delivered online with using slideshow. Okay, next step would be asynchronous time, the students working by themselves in autonomy using PDF documents, screencast or mind mapping, for instance. Go back to synchronous with practices time using question forms and mind mapping. The students were working on the previous step. Go back to asynchronous the week later. The students once again working with PDF and screencast, and finishing with a workshop synchronous. So I think those scenarios were much more usual now during the pandemic time than they were before. And this is very important. It's something I will go back to in a couple of minutes. So much more synchronous, asynchronous teaching scenarios. And lastly, we all ask ourselves since a couple of weeks, what will be the new balance after the COVID time? What will be the new balance between distance and face-to-face? In the research I'm conducting now at Kyodai, actually in all the interviews I've had, everybody is telling me, and I totally agree with that, that the new normal will not be a go back to the old normal. We will not go back 100% of the face-to-face like we did before. And it's pretty obvious that we will keep some online activities. That's pretty obvious. Yoshi Sensei was mentioning that I have a lot of involvement in EduCourse that many of you know, especially through the conference. And actually during the last conference, EduCourse gave some forecasts for 2021. So this is for IT, but I think it can be very easily translated to teaching and learning practices. They were discussing about 3 scenarios: restore, evolve, and transform. Okay, so what does it mean? It means that if we have the restore scenario, after the COVID, we simply go back to the old normal. We go back 100% face-to-face on the campuses. Nothing changed. It was just a special time, which was the COVID time. And once again, nobody's thinking like that. Evolve and transform, it means first for evolve that we will keep some lessons of the COVID time to keep them on the middle on the long term, so having a part of the teaching online, not entirely, but online. And transform, it means that we will keep all the things that we did during the COVID time to implement them on the middle, on the long term. So right now, the question is actually the balance between evolve and transform scenario. We don't know exactly where it's going to be, but it should be one of those two scenarios. And when we talk about the balance between face-to-face and distance learning in the future, of course, we have to remind that on our campuses, we have those spaces. Those new types of libraries. This is Seikei next to Tokyo. We have those very interesting concept of open space in Hakodate Mirai Daikaku. We have those new lecture theaters. This one is in Melbourne in Australia. We have those beautiful learning commons. This is the one of Osaka International University, and we have Yamamura-san with you today in the chat. Ritsumeikan APU, those very new facilities that we already had, this active learning studio in Melbourne, we had that since years, and finally we may use them now in a very, very new configuration, and maybe in a much more meaningful way. And so that brings me to the second topic of today.
Augeri Sensei.
Yeah.
I'm very sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
So far it has been so rich and insightful, and we really appreciate. And I think since actually it's from Matsushita Sensei, posted some questions, but it may be a good idea to you talked about no more than 10 minutes talk without interaction with participants, right? In your slide. So if you would agree, then why don't we just take some time here to interact for you to interact with the audience. Would that work for you?
Perfectly.
Great, thank you. And so you see the chat thread, and there are some two questions from Matsushita Sensei, and maybe I should just read out. So under COVID-19, how are classes conducted in French universities? It would be great if you could be more specific. For example, what is the format of classes in hybrid HyFlex? Yeah, that first question.
Okay. So, of course, this is a very fundamental question. And actually, for us, the situation was pretty simple. As I mentioned, all the campuses were closed, completely closed from March to September. So there was no option for us to do hybrid or HyFlex at that time. So from March to September, it was full online classes, 100%. Back to September, October, when we had this short period of limited number of students being back to the campuses, we did, as I said, very partial hybrid and HyFlex. And to be honest with you, because this is a question people ask me very often, what people do prefer between hybrid and HyFlex. To be honest with you, so far I didn't find anybody that would choose HyFlex on purpose. Nobody. People are doing HyFlex because they have no choice. Because the system, the organization of the university said, okay, in your classes, you're going to have 20% of the people coming face-to-face, and these are real numbers, and these are usual real numbers. 20 people of the people could access the campus. So in the same class, you had 20% of the people coming face-to-face, and the 80 remaining % of the people following the class remotely. So this is the reason why people didn't have any choice by doing HyFlex. But if they had choice, all of my colleagues told me that they would like to prefer to do hybrid in the synchronous, asynchronous way, meaning that they could do a full face-to-face class for small group in a synchronous way, of course, a full online class for a larger group, and then going back to asynchronous activity. But HyFlex is never a spontaneous choice. Actually, it was never a spontaneous choice in French universities, but some of them did because of the system having 20% of people going back, but it wasn't a choice.
Thank you. Great. So second question is, how about full online classes? In France, are there any organizations that support FD in individual universities? What type of experts work in your consortium? Yeah, so I got a similar thought and a question, and that is, so we understand Digital University is the alliance of 10 universities in France. And you've been energetically providing, some these faculty development courses and to help them transform their courses into online teaching and learning. But are there even these 10 universities? These campuses providing individually as institutions some kind of faculty development, or they pretty much delegate that functions to Digital University?
So actually, there are two things I could say about that. First, of course, in each of our university, that actually we have 25 universities in the consortium, and almost all of them decided to settle faculty development sessions by themselves. But these sessions were running alongside the ones we were delivering, and especially alongside the teaching with digital course that we scheduled from September. And I have to say that even though some of those universities decided to have internal faculty development session, most of this faculty development was delegated to us. First, because we were doing that since 2009. So this initiative is very well installed in the landscape of Paris area. Actually, everybody knows that faculty development initiative since 12 years. And they knew that we were doing the switching to online, and we were doing this special program for helping the faculties to switch to online. So even though some universities decided to have some internal sessions, most of them were recommending to their faculties to register our program alongside.
I see. Well, that sounds great, because in my fantasy, you may remember we used to have National Institute for Media Education,
Right.
That attached to Open University, in Japan, and they were, supposed to provide all the this kind of IT, ICT, and faculty development kind of support to really leverage, expand their capability, in doing this kind of online, blended learning. But it disappeared, and it was disappeared. And then so during when the pandemic started, I was, wondering what if there was still NIME, that could provide kind of national, even nationwide, some support, to all the universities and the colleges, some to use, some there may be online faculty seminars or some resources. But, the truth is, the individual universities pretty much had to provide that kind of support on their own. So I thought, given what you talk about, some Digital University, what it has been able to provide, and in fact, the many participating universities start kind of relying on your service, Digital University's service. I think that's great. So do you think that's gonna so this kind of a trend would continue? I mean, in your country? I mean, you said 20-something universities now in the consortium, but from now on, will there be more kind of like a trend to have that kind of consortium will be responsible, for providing, this kind of faculty support, not just for online, but for some kind of teacher training, faculty training?
I definitely do think so. I definitely do think so. And we received a lot of requests from universities outside Paris area for this. But it's also possible, Yoshi-sensei, because in France, the system we have for our universities, as I said, it's entirely national. So first, and second, mutualization is something that is very obvious since a long time. I remember I mentioned that I was working as expert for educational technologies at the Furansu Monkasho during 5 years, and all the programs I was running there were mutualized programs, saying, okay, we will design something, digital services, digital infrastructure, or something to promote digital practices once for many universities. So this is that, culturally speaking, is completely integrated in the mindset of the French universities since a long time. So it's very obvious for us to say, okay, we can share such kind of initiatives.
Right.
And once again, for us in our faculty development initiative, it was, the example is, I think, very relevant because it was existing since 2009. So it's 12 years old. So everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. But regarding the expansions, I do think definitely that it could expand in the future because of this COVID time and because of the increasing of needs of faculty development. Yeah, definitely. I do think so.
Great, thank you. One more question then. Speaking of NIME, actually, Aoki Sensei, now at Open University, is a former NIME faculty member. Her question is, how were the modules of the FD determined? Were they just decided by your group? Were they based on some brainstorming sessions with consortium members?
Okay,
Response?
Hello, Kumiko. Hello, Kumiko. Great to have you.
Yeah, you know, I'm pretty sure you know her.
I know Kumiko very well,
yes,
indeed. And we always have very interesting discussions. I'm not surprised by the very interesting question she's asking now. So how were the modules of the FD determined only by me? No, of course it's not true. Of course it's not true. Actually, you may remember that in my timeline, I was mentioning that we took 1 month after the first tests, live tests of online sessions. We took 1 month to think about the program during April 2020. And actually, it's in that month that we decided the program. We decided that, and this is an answer I wanted to give to Matsushita Sensei for the second question. She asked what type of experts work in the consortium for FD. For the courses I'm talking about, it's only faculties. We wanted to keep that peer-to-peer because it gives a legitimacy of the things that are delivered. It's only faculties that I'm selecting and I'm working with for some of them since many years. And so to go back to Aoki Sensei's question, actually during April, we did a lot of meetings, not only with my colleagues that were about to give those sessions, so those very faculties, but also with attendees that we knew, regular attendees. And we said, okay, now you have to switch entirely online. What are your needs? So we knew that, for instance, they needed to design slideshow, they needed how to use interactivity on the video conferencing platforms. But we made a lot of consultation during 1 month, April, and this is actually what led us to delay the real start of the program late April. A lot of consultations.
Thank you. So those are questions we have so far. So I think maybe we should just let you get back to your slide presentation. And okay. Then, for the audiences, please continue to post your questions, even for this first part, faculty development in the COVID time. So then after his second part, Augeri Sensei's second part of presentation, we'll get back to Q&A sessions later. Thank you. So Augeri Sensei, please.
Thank you very much. So second part, let's talk about learning spaces and what kind of opportunities we have regarding them, regarding those spaces in the recomposition of the learning territories. As many of you know, and I mentioned that during my introduction, I'm conducting an international comparative study of learning spaces since 2016. This was the reason why I had my first day at Kyoda in 2017, actually. So this study is covering 4 main areas: North America, Europe, Asia, and Oceania. Okay. I'm trying to analyze this phenomenon of learning spaces in a very wide angle. So I'm covering all these topics. I won't spend time right now to explain each of them, but I just wanted to mention that too many times when people are talking about learning spaces, innovative physical learning spaces, they are focusing on 2 things that are the layout, so the furnishing, what kind of tables, what kind of chair, and the technology we put inside. And I think that a successful integration of learning space in an academic strategy needs to have a wider point of view, including all the other topics I'm having on that slide: location on the campuses, how is it integrated in the governance, new services, many things. So this is the way I'm analyzing this phenomenon. So when we talk about learning spaces, what are we talking about? I just would like to give you some examples and main categories of learning spaces. First, the active learning classrooms. Here we have the gorgeous Mirais of Kyushu Institute of Technology. Maybe we have Kondo Sensei in the chat room today. Certainly one of the best active learning classrooms currently in Japan. New generation of lecture theaters. This one is in Montreal, in Canada. So as you may see, it's a lecture theaters using collaborative tables. The Learning Commons, once again, the Osaka International University Learning Commons, one of my favorite in Japan. It's just 40 kilometers from Kyoto. If you have a chance to visit it, it's absolutely great. And new generation of libraries. Some of them are called learning centers, but this is a very nice new library, new design library in Akita Kokusai Daigaku, Kato Sensei, that I've been very pleased to visit a couple of months ago. So mainly we could say that we have 4 main categories of learning spaces: active learning classrooms, collaborative lecture theaters, learning commons, and learning centers. We can divide those 4 categories in 2 main families: the formal spaces, in which we have direct interaction between faculties and the students, and the informal spaces in which the students are working by themselves. So typically in the asynchronous activities I was talking about before. So what are the trends about those spaces? First, let's talk about active learning classrooms. First, I would like to mention that active learning classrooms are showing a huge diversity. I wanted to mention that because sometimes people are discussing with me about active learning classroom design in a way that could, it may think that there is a magical recipe to create an active learning classroom, which is that you put movable tables, movable chairs, a lot of technology, and abracadabra, you have an active learning classrooms. And actually, it's a little bit more complicated than that. It's more various than that, more diverse than that. So for instance, here in Seattle at University of Washington, we don't have any flexibility in the space. The tables are fixed, but they provide a lot of features in terms of screen sharing. So it's a choice of design, which is very relevant. But that is not based on the movability of the space. This active learning classrooms in Kyushu Daigaku, in the new Ito campus, is very flexible. So as you may see, it's very different from the first one we had in Seattle. Let's go now in Melbourne. They mix in Melbourne the 2 types of furnishing, fixed and movable, in the same space. And I was also mentioning that is in this supposed to be magical recipe to create active learning classrooms, people are sometimes thinking that we need to put a lot of technology. So I'm working for a digital university, so of course I like technology, but please have a look to the shiny white surface that you have on the tables. You see, we have this white shiny surface. Actually, it's writable with normal pen, analog pen. So the students can write directly on the tables. It's not digital, and it's a feature that people really love. University of British Columbia in Canada, once again, completely different setup for the active learning classroom. The Mirais, once again, and Kyushu Institute of Technology, or this one in Perth in Australia. So see, it's very, very diverse. There is not one single pattern to create active learning classroom. It's very diverse, and I do think that before creating an active learning classroom and before talking about the design, we should discuss with the faculties about the activities that they're going to have in this active learning classroom, because the design has to come from the activities and not the activities coming from the design. But beyond the diversity, something that we might see on the campuses since a couple of years now about the active learning classrooms is that most of them are generic. You can schedule any any kinds of topics, any kind of classes inside, but some of them are getting specialized. And that's a pretty interesting phenomenon that makes them very relevant, because in those kind of facilities, you can do things that you couldn't do anywhere else. For instance, here in Montreal, in Canada, again, we have this active learning classroom only for chemistry. So instead of having the straight benches, we have collaborative tables for doing chemistry. Same thing from geology here. Biology in Denver, in Colorado, we have biology active learning classrooms, once again, fostering collaboration in small groups. Or this one in chemistry in Sydney, in Australia. So this is a phenomenon that we may see a lot. We might see also spaces that are mixing active learning with new technologies, and especially visualization technologies. This is in Perth in Australia. It's a classroom using this hemispherical screen for having, for instance, inside blood vessels, as you may see here, or panoramic screen that the students can interact with by gesture. So this is new devices mixing basically what we call the XR technology, so augmented reality, mixed reality, with active learning spaces. So this is a phenomenon that we see, a trend that we might see, specialized active learning classroom. And this is very interesting because this is a very good reason why we should bring back the students on the campuses to use such kind of specialized facilities. Lecture theaters. This is by far the rarest kind of learning space to be seen on the campuses. There are few of them, but it's not very usual. First, because it's very difficult to create. It has to make a lecture theater, impossible to use during the entire time of the construction, which is very difficult to schedule. And in some way, I think that culturally speaking, many teachers are not ready to put collaborative phases and to put active learning phases in a lecture. This is cultural maybe, but we have some nice examples. This one is University of British Columbia in Vancouver, once again in Canada. So as you may see, you have students working in groups in a lecture time. We have this one in Newcastle, not Newcastle in the UK, but the Newcastle in Australia next to Sydney, with those diner type tables, very interesting to follow the lectures and working in groups. This one, which is a design school, as you may guess, considering the picture, it's a design school of Queensland University of Technology in Brisbane. This very nice lecture theatre in Monash University in Melbourne in Australia. So very nice examples, but it's pretty rare. And something else I would like to mention is that for this family of the formal spaces, formal learning spaces, including active learning classrooms and new generation of lecture theaters, the collaborative lecture theaters, they had, I think, the focus of stakeholders up to a few years ago. When I was discussing with university presidents 6-7 years ago about learning space strategy, the entry point, the starting point was always active learning classrooms, always. But what I do see right now through my research all across the world is that there is a shifting of the focus of the stakeholders when they consider learning space from formal spaces to informal spaces. There is a huge shift about that. As I mentioned a couple of times, and Yoshi Sensei was mentioning that at the beginning, there is this EDUCO's annual conference, and I'm very pleased to leading the French delegation going to that conference every year. We have a report that is published in English. I'm always very keen to share it with my Japanese colleagues. And actually, in that EDUCO's annual conference, since 4 years now, I'm giving a speech about the international situation of learning spaces. I'm giving a speech based on my research to give what are the trends of the learning spaces for this year and the forecast for the next year. So I did that since 2017. The session was called Learning Spaces Around the World, 2018, 2019, and the last one that was online last October. But as you may see, in 2018, I changed the title of my speech and I called that session The Rise of Informal Learning Spaces, because at that time I was really feeling this shifting of the stakeholders' focus on these kind of spaces, learning commons and learning centers, much more than the active learning classroom like it was before. And there are some evidences about that. I would like to show you the results of a research project that has been led in 2016 in Sydney, in Australia. And actually, University of Sydney decided to follow a cohort of 2,000 students during 1 year. And they wanted to see what kind of spaces those students were using during 1 year. And these are the results. Actually, those 2,000 students during 1 year used the formal spaces during 168,000 hours cumulated, the virtual spaces during 140,000 hours cumulated, and the informal spaces 420,000 hours. It's huge. And to put other words on that, they use basically the learning commons of the universities 3 times more than the classrooms. Okay, so this is an evidence that clearly explains why the stakeholders are more and more looking at and considering to build learning commons and learning centers on the campuses. So when we talk about such kind of facilities, what are we talking about? We are talking about such kind of things. This is an informal area in University of Auckland in New Zealand. So you see the students can stay there between different classes, between lectures. We have this new generation of libraries, the very beautiful one of Seikei next to Tokyo. We have this very nice learning center that is in Newcastle in Australia. This area in Yasuda University next to Hiroshima, Brisbane, Queensland University of Technology, the very nice QIS 8 of Kanda Kokusai University next to Tokyo. Here in Singapore, in Nanyang University, we have this library that has been completely refurbished to create an open space in the middle, and they removed the bookshelves on the last floor. This wonderful library in North Carolina State University, the Hunt Library, which is certainly one of the most famous examples of new libraries currently in North America and maybe in the world. This learning commons in University of Melbourne in Australia. Once again, one of my favorites, Yamamura-san, learning commons in Japan, and the one of Osaka Kokusai Daigaku, and some other examples like this in Singapore, or this, once again, the Hakodate Mirais Daigaku, in which they have an entire part of the campus that is an open space, actually. So this gives a lot of possibilities for formal and informal activities. So going back to this difference between the formal learning spaces and the informal ones, actually, through my research, I noticed that they face, for both of them, challenges. And first, for the formal spaces, the active learning classrooms and the collaborative lecture theaters, maybe you will agree with me when I'm saying that they have a problem, which is that they struggle to move beyond the threshold of experimentation. What I want to say by that is that in many universities that I visited across the globe, they have 1, 2, sometimes 4 active learning classrooms, but they are not used to schedule tenure classes. It's used once per semester for a special class, okay? It's not mainstream. I do not say that the design is not good. I do not say that faculties are doing very nice, they do very nice things, the faculties in such kind of classes, but the problem is that it's used only a couple of times during the semester. It's not scheduled as a normal classroom for tenure classes. And really, I see that the active learning classrooms are struggling a lot to move beyond this experimentation step. Same thing for the collaborative lecture theaters. On their sides, in the informal space, the learning commons and the learning centers, beyond being more and more numerous on the campuses and beyond wonderful design, sometimes they struggle to be fully integrated in the academic strategy, fully integrated in the teaching and learning scenarios as a place where people can conduct informal activities. So in many universities, people know that there is a learning commons, people know that there is a learning center, but faculties don't integrate them in the academic sequence to say to the students, okay, I will give you an assignment that you're going to do as a group activity, and you can do that in the Learning Commons. It's very, very rare. And these are, I think, the two challenges that the two families of learning spaces are facing right now, formal and informal. But beyond those challenges, there are some new trends that we can observe in the typologies of learning spaces, and especially in this sort of separation that we had up to a few years ago between the formal spaces and the informal ones, separation that is tending to disappear, because more and more I can see learning centers, so informal spaces, that are including active learning classrooms, or learning commons that are including active learning classrooms, or learning commons and active learning classroom in the same building. So this border is tending to disappear. But beyond that, there is a new kind of spaces that is actually inserting in between the formal spaces and the informal ones, the transitional spaces. This is certainly the newest category of learning spaces that we can see on the campuses. And to explain you those spaces, those transitional spaces, I would like to highlight the kind of geography that we could observe regarding the learning spaces on the campuses during the last few years. The first typical typology of learning spaces was a decentralized model, meaning that we had the Graduate School of Education that built an active learning classroom, the Graduate School of Humanities that also built an active learning classroom, the library decided to build a learning commons. So everything is spread all across the campus, and usually this is reflecting multiple local strategies that haven't been all the time fully coordinated, okay? So independent initiatives, no campus-wide coordination. Then after that, we moved to a centralized model. This was really reflecting that the university governances and the stakeholders were more and more interested in learning spaces and decided to invest on them and having a real strategy. And in many times, this strategy was translated in an iconic building on the campus that is centralizing formal spaces, typically active learning classrooms, and informal spaces such as a learning commons, but this in an iconic building. And now, more and more, we are going back to a mixed model, which is still an institution-wide strategy, but which actually consists to have what? It consists to have, for instance, specialized active learning classrooms in the graduate school. So for instance, active learning classroom for geology, active learning classrooms for chemistry, some other generic active learning classrooms in other buildings, and still keeping an iconic, innovative building in which we're going to have active learning classrooms as well, and for instance, a learning commons. So this is clearly the model in which we are going to, considering the discussions I can have with governances and stakeholders. So going back to our question of the transitional spaces, those new spaces that appeared between the formal and the informal ones, where are they located? Actually, they are located in the between. Everywhere, all across the campuses, we have those small spaces going in the between of classrooms, in the hallways, at the exit of a learning center or learning commons. And so those transitional spaces, how do they look like? They look like, for instance, this. In Seattle, University of Washington, at the entrance of the learning center, we have this space where the students can decide to stop 10, 15, 20 minutes, charge the battery of the laptop, relaxing a little bit. It's very comfortable. And they stop there on the way to the learning center or when they leave to go to a class. Here in Perth, in Australia, at the entrance of the library, they have those small space in which the students can have small informal activities before going to the library. Refurbishing of stairs here in the Hunt Library in North Carolina, or here in Adelaide in Australia, they decided to refurbish a part of the stairs to transform that in a place where the students can stay for a couple of minutes to conduct activities. Same thing here in Denver. They just put in those wood boxes, power plugs, and now the students can stay there for a few minutes. Here at the QS 8 building at Kanda Kokusai, same thing. At the entrance of the building, the stair is also a small lecture theater. So these are multi-purpose places. Here in Adelaide, once again, sunny Stony Brook on Long Island next to New York in USA, here in Perth in California, or here in Melbourne in Australia. Small spaces like this in the between of classrooms and bigger informal spaces such as learning commons and learning centers in which the students can stay for a couple of minutes. So those transitional spaces, what do they provide? Basically, they provide a link like this, which makes a physical and functional continuity of the learning spaces all across the campus. Okay, this is why they are interesting. But now, considering all this, I would like to go back to some of the lessons that we learned from the COVID time that I was discussing in the first part about faculty development and how those spaces could have a future at the post-COVID era. You remember that I was showing this type of sequence, having synchronous times and asynchronous times. So let's now imagine how the learning spaces could fit with those activities. First, in a synchronous time, we had this lecture, the number 1 lecture using slideshow. We could conduct that by video conferencing. We know that online learning is not so bad, it can work. And maybe we could use also a collaborative lecture theater if we have to put active learning times during the lecture. But let's imagine that now we stay on video conferencing. Okay. For the practice, we could go back on the campus, or we could still do that by video conferencing at the COVID time. For workshop, hands-on activities, group working activities, we could definitely use an active learning classroom. That would be extremely relevant, that really would bring a value for the students to go back to the campus compared to a video conferencing to conduct workshop in group working activities by using the features of an active learning classroom. Let's now go to the asynchronous way. We had a lot of activities that the students are supposed to conduct by themselves, possibly in group. For that, of course, the transitional spaces I just talked about, the learning commons and the learning centers, are perfect location to support and to help the students to have those group working activities managed by themselves in autonomy, in an asynchronous way. So as you may see, in a post-COVID era scenario, definitely in a balance between online teaching and face-to-face teaching, there is a position that can be in which the learning spaces might be very, very relevant. And if I go back to my typology and the challenges that those spaces are facing, I was saying that formal spaces and especially active learning classrooms are struggling to move beyond the threshold of experimentation, meaning they struggle to be used in tenure classes every week. And the learning commons and the learning centers were struggling to be integrated in the academic scenario in a formal way, in which the faculties would say to the students, okay, I give you an assignment and you're going to do that on next week by using the learning center or the learning commons. And now, actually, the COVID could give responses to those challenges. First, because for the formal spaces, now we have more and more systematic faculty development. And Yoshi-sensei, you asked me about the future after the COVID. I really do think that faculty development will be much more systematic than it was before, because it's getting in the mindset of the faculties. So putting more and more faculty development, it means that we could put more and more faculty development that is helping the faculties to use those facilities at the huge potential, and saying, okay, active learning classroom is not going to be for a special class, it's going to be your normal class, but you're going to put systematically active learning in your face-to-face activities. So this is check. On the informal side, the new synchronous and asynchronous patterns I was discussing about, in which we could have more asynchronous steps in the academic scenario, in the teaching practice, in which the faculties could more integrate those spaces to say to the students, okay, I give you an assignment and you're going to do that in the learning commons by group activities. It gives a reason for the students to go much more and more systematically to the learning commons and the learning center, and to have a pedagogical legitimacy that sometimes they were struggling to have before. That might be checked as well. Okay, so I do think that even though right now we are not using the physical space at all, obviously in the future, those kind of new spaces that are really bringing a value for the teachers and also for the students by the features they propose can be a huge asset in the post-pandemic era. And so I would like to finish that speech today to say that definitely we have covered two topics, the faculty development and the learning spaces. And the main question is, finally, is the COVID-19 and does the COVID-19 provide opportunities for sustainable change and a deep transformation in the future? I do think it does. We are going through dramatic times, definitely. It's terribly complicated for many people. It's dramatic for some families to face this disease. But at least if we can have nice outcomes, it could be on the teaching and learning practices. And I do think that for the faculty development and the learning spaces, there could be a bright future at the post-pandemic era. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Augeri Sensei. And it's very hard to provide response, but I usually do this handcraft thing, icon things. And so on behalf of everybody, attending this session, thank you so much for your very inspiring and definitely the second part is even more provoking towards the future. So I really appreciate your thoughts and sharing your experiences. And let's go back to the chat questions. I contributed by myself to. But let's start with this one from Hui Ling Wan-san. How did creating a huge open space in the NTU library enhance the learning space? Is it about visual and physical comfort?
So it's not, it's Nanyang, yeah, sorry, right, it's Nanyang Technological University. Actually, the basic philosophy of that refurbishing was simple. They noticed that the students were not using the books so much anymore, but the students needed to have the space to work for asynchronous activities. So I will show once again the picture. Maybe it could be interesting. So the thing they decided to do here was to remove the bookshelves on the last floor. You might see them on the top of the picture. The bookshelves have been removed there. And they really wanted to create a space at the right entrance of the library, because the stairs that you can see is the entrance of the library. That is first very open. It's very engaging to go in that library when you see that space at the entrance. And as you may see, there is this mini lecture theater that is multi-purpose. What I mean by that is that sometimes they organize mini lectures in that small lecture theater, but when they don't do that, this lecture theater is coming a sort of transitional space or small informal space. As you may see, there is a students working, lying down. There are power plugs everywhere. So this is a perfect example of changing the philosophy of the libraries from a place where you use books, only do that, to a place where the students can stay and work. So this is the philosophy they apply to this refurbishing.
Thank you. And that question and your response to this also brings to my question, which is, what are some implications of these physical learning spaces for the future of virtual learning spaces, both for formal and informal learning? Because I've been very frustrated, and also this NTU's, some great space reminded me, if you remember, Augeri Sensei, like late 90s and early 2000s, there was a booming of Second Life. And Second Life as a platform, I think still there, but it was hype. It's over 20 years ago. And the people were very excited, crazy about creating different kinds of learning spaces. And the one common one common attribute I found is somehow people like no windows, no walls, and somehow by the sea. It's a by the sea campuses or classroom using the virtual space designing tools, environment like Second Life. That was a joke. But at any rate, I'm so disappointed why in 2020 and 21 now we are still doing this formal learning and teaching in this 2D web browser, flat space, chat, and these tools have been around for over 20, 30 years. But where is that kind of a beautiful virtual learning space? And of course, the physical learning spaces, as you've been sharing with us today, been making great progress. But and even under COVID, we have been able to deal with pretty much formal learning part. I mean the class periods. And so even at Kyoto University, we've been it has been very challenging to support what you call like an informal learning space, or even like a even better transitional, some space online. We try to make ourselves, faculty members, we try to make ourselves happy because we by just delivering online classes. In some mode. But students have been very disappointed because there is no kind of chit-chatting session, time before and after, some classes. And there is, of course, no like learning commons or even cafeteria where they could do, just chit-chatting, but also peer-to-peer learning and sometimes teaching too. So what do you think as an expert, the implications of these beautiful, progressing face-to-face virtual learning spaces, and how we could learn and just build the new virtual learning spaces, and we could just keep, going back and forth between, just different kinds of virtual and face-to-face physical learning spaces with asynchronous and synchronous use. Sorry, it's kind of big question, but
that's super interesting, Yoshi-sensei. I'm smiling because it's been really hoisashiburi. I didn't hear about Second Life. It's the first time I discuss about Second Life since at least 5 or 6 years, I think. And it's indeed, I remember the hype as you for that. But going back to your question, I completely agree with you. It's interesting to see that the virtual learning spaces, basically, they didn't evolve at the same pace than the physical ones. And we have a lot of innovations for physical spaces, whether they could be formal or informal, but we have a lot of innovations. As I said, they still have challenges to overcome, but the design is very innovative and the evolution is much more significant than what we have in the online virtual spaces. So exactly as you said, I'm sometimes very frustrated to see that, okay, we have a couple of new features in the video conferencing tools, in the LMS or such kind of things. But I was discussing with Kajita-sensei, my old friend Kajita-sensei I'm working with at Kyodai right now. We were discussing about the NGDLE, the new generation digital learning environment. And he and I, we strongly believe in that because that could be a huge leap forward, a real leap forward for digital learning environment, much more than doing some updates on concepts that basically, as you said, are the same since 20 years. Because basically the concept of a LMS from now in 2020 is not so far from the LMS of 2000, I think. The basic concepts. It didn't change so much. Of course, we have new features, but the concept is the same. And I'm sorry, but I don't have I would say, magical answer about that. I feel the same frustration than you, and I really have a great hopes and great expectation in all those works that are conducted now around the new generation of digital learning environment, because I do think that virtual learning spaces should get inspiration for the physical ones, especially by providing virtual spaces for the formal activities, virtual spaces for the informal activity, having virtual spaces in which the students could gather by themselves, just by themselves without the faculties, and conducting collaborative activities with real collaborative tools as they would do in the learning commons. But so far, I agree with you, it doesn't exist. It's pretty frustrating, and I do hope that there would be some exchanges between the physical spaces to the new generation digital learning environment. I completely agree with you.
Thank you, Audrey Sensei. And let's continue with even more questions that keep coming. So two questions from Shibukawa-san. So did you provide any topics other than how to conduct classes in your faculty development program? In Japanese FD events, some teachers asked how to deal with students who don't have PC and strong networks and have kind of handicap, how to create online tests. So again, these, well, let's kind of skip on this digital divide, some part, that which is important, but again, that's a long story. But how about, so what kind of like teaching learning activities supporting those you covered in your FD workshops online? I mean, like conducting like at Kyoto University, for example, conducting online test, has been one of the big, some topics. How to conduct fair, safe online exams, for example. Did you cover something like that and some other topics?
Yeah, that's a very important question indeed. So we did so. So the equipment rate of the students in France, considering a laptop and smartphone, I think is pretty similar to the one to Japan. The telecom carrier plans are much cheaper in France than in Japan. So we could have been thinking at the first look that it wouldn't be an issue for the students to use their cell phone plan to connect from home. To give you an idea, in France, a cell phone plan, say now 5G is arriving slowly, but the 4G cell phone plan with unlimited, some of them have unlimited data, it's between 20 and 40 euros. So it's 3,500 yen gurai per month. So I think it's much cheaper than in Japan, but so many students have them, but some of them didn't. So I know that there were some pressures from the Association of Digital Vice Presidents of French universities to telecom carrier to create special plans for the students, a very low price for that. But beyond those technical and financial issues, the answer I could give is that in our faculty development program, we really wanted to have a special focus on asynchronous contents. We wanted to explain to the faculties how they could produce quality asynchronous contents. So we have a huge focus on the way to produce very nicely designed slideshows, how to create screencasts in which they could use those slideshows and give their comments by audio, and providing that on a platform that the students could access even without a super fast connection, but at the time they want and with the capacities they have. So instead of saying, okay, we're going to have only live delivery, we could say to this faculty, we're going to explain you how to do asynchronous contents that the students can deal with low capacity IT or telecom. So definitely we included that in our program. Yeah.
Thank you. That's very important to overcome that kind of a divide. Yeah, thank you. And the second question from Shibukawa-san this is $1 million. Well, we don't call it the $1 million question anymore. Maybe $1 billion question, $1 million. But how do you think about the identity of traditional universities in this new normal era? I believe the more online hybrid classes promoted and provided, right, by the regular universities. And then that's going to be become more difficult to distinguish between distance universities, online universities, and traditional universities. It's kind of intimidating for online only, virtual universities, right? Because all the physical universities are becoming at least hybrid, universities, right? Any thoughts on this?
But this is indeed, I would say, the €1 million question. No? I don't know if you have. I don't know if you have. Do we have 3 or 4 hours to discuss that this morning? Yeah, of course, this is a fundamental question. I would think about that maybe on the other side, and thinking about the two traditional universities that were a little bit reluctant to renovate their teaching and learning practices. Instead of discussing the competition between distance universities and traditional universities that are getting hybrid, I would discuss between those traditional universities that are getting hybrid and that can bring with them universities that were reluctant to become hybrid, because all universities now will become hybrid. There is no question anymore about that. So I think for a university in which all of us, we know that sometimes we have some faculties that are not so keen to renovate their teaching and learning practices. All of us, we know that. Then maybe now they have no choice, because most of the universities are going through that direction. And I think it's going to be very, very difficult for a university to stay fully traditional. So I would see that on that side rather than the competition between digital universities and a hybrid one, to be honest with you.
Yeah, thank you. Also, I know the coexisting model is wonderful, but also this is intimidating for real universities, because again they have to really focus more on got to be keen on creating beautiful and functional learning spaces on their campuses, physically, because a lot of things can be substituted with online teaching and learning activities. So it may be good for your business. Learning spaces, physical learning spaces will be even more popular subject. But having said that, it leads to the next questions from Matsushita Sensei again. And the learning spaces you showed us today were all created inside the university. So do the learning spaces need to be in the university? Do you know any publicly shared learning spaces, maybe outside, of university campuses?
Actually, just before I left France to come back to Japan on late November, I was working in Paris area on a project to build what we call third places outside universities. So definitely, I was working on a project. It's still on the go there, to use city libraries, for instance, and to create a special space in the city libraries for the students of the university that is nearby. And now, Matsushita Sensei, no, I don't think that the learning spaces have to be on the campus for all of them. The title of the second part of my presentation was Recomposition of the Learning Territory. And I think that one of the lessons of the COVID is that definitely the border of the learning territory has changed. Definitely changed. We have the online world, we have the physical world on the campus, and we have something that can be in the between. And typically when I was talking about transitional space, with such kind of third places outside the campuses, it could be a transitional space as well. So no, I don't think that the learning spaces, physically speaking, have to be on the campuses. I don't think so.
Thank you. And she has also another question. The beautiful learning spaces have become a kind of advertisement to attract students to the university. Yes, not just learning spaces, but also tasty foods, can be served as a beautiful cafeteria kind of space, in a sense too. But no longer a library, right? Library used to be a strong selling point, for the university, physical library, but that it's kind of disappearing now. And it's kind of a commodity, becoming commodity in terms of the digital library, any university can offer. So it's not like a Stanford has or Yale, has the largest libraries on the, so that doesn't compete anymore. So the need for research on how it actually used and how it promotes students' learning. I think you're expert on this. So it's not just aesthetics, how beautiful they look, but how beautifully they are being used to promote good teaching and learning.
So actually, there are two questions here. On the first one, Matsushita Sensei is asking if learning spaces could be an advertisement to attract students to university. So this is a very provocative question, so I'm going to answer in a provocative way as well. Yes, I do think so. I do think so. And I do think so. And sometimes when you have very nice designs, I do love architecture, of course. But sometimes when you have when you see very nice design, you may also ask, so what do you do with this design? What is the purpose of this design? And sometimes it's pretty difficult to get answers about that. When I'm conducting my research about learning spaces, there is always this word saying we conduct active learning. Okay, what is active learning? Precisely. So say it's the students discussing with each other. Okay, so what does it enhance in the learning experience? So to answer Matsushita Sensei question, I would say that in that sense, I think Japan is in a very specific position. This is something I clearly wrote about in my research. In Japan, you have a very big number of universities. 80% of them are private, and the demographic trends are making that you don't have enough students to fill all universities right now, and it's getting worse and worse as far as I know. So the challenge for many private universities is definitely to attract students. And I do think that having such kind of space is a part of the attractivity of the institution. And it's not a shame. I mean, it's not a shame. It's just real life. They need something to attract to the students. And going beyond that, having a learning commons that has been designed first to attract students doesn't mean that they won't have very nice and very interesting teaching and learning activities inside. It's maybe not the priority, but it can be a second effect. So yes, Matsushita Sensei, I really think that for some universities, and especially private one, it's an asset to attract the students, but it doesn't mean that they won't conduct renovated teaching and learning practices inside. I do think so. And your second question, of course, is a key one. Is there any research about how the students use those spaces? On learning commons and learning centers, very few. And of course, for that, we need to have a qualitative approach. I've been discussing that with many of you that are attending that session on today. That yeah, we definitely need to conduct qualitative research on that, because it's very, very difficult to get some tangible insights of the way students are using the learning commons and the learning center, so especially in the informal space, in their learning activities. Maybe they go there just to relax, we don't know, and it's also important in the student side to relax, but having a real tangible view on the learning activities remain a challenge. It remains a challenge. So there are very interesting researches that have been led, especially in active learning classroom, and I would like to mention the one that Tamura Sensei has been leading in Sofia University. We have been discussing that when I was there in 2019. It's a research about a system that is detecting the posture of the students when they work in group around the collaborative table. So it's a posture detection system that is supposed to translate the way the students are engaging themselves in group working activities. So this is the kind of things we could do, but definitely, especially for the informal spaces, there is still a lot of things to assess what is really happening inside. I completely agree.
Thank you. Well, because you are French, it's probably appropriate to say it's a Michelin rating, restaurant rating. Right? They don't rate restaurants by just a beautiful design, settings, but totally customers, based on customers' experience, satisfactions, the food and how, and it's not just quality of food and drink, but also, if people can have a good time, there. Now, good experience, there. So that kind of evaluation, with a kind of totalness, of the teaching learning experience, it can be done in this kind of learning spaces, I think. So we have a lot to do. And I'm keen to the time, and we have 10 minutes left. And one son and one sensei, probably. So in addition to what I said, I said how the beautiful learning spaces still being utilized in the pandemic era, since students are in college not together. And so it's no use for physical beautiful learning spaces, yes. And with the physical learning spaces slowly become obsolete, how can we still justify spending a lot of our budgets on this furniture equipment? It's very expensive, So you kind of partly answered to this question, but any other additional thoughts and comments on this?
Yeah, I have two things I would like to say about that. The first thing, I remind an interesting talk I had 4 years ago with a library director in Japan, and we were talking about what is a learning commons finally. And I was talking before during my speech about a sort of magical recipe to create active learning classroom. You put movable table, movable chair, a lot of technology, and abracadabra, you have an active learning classroom. And sometimes there are some similar things to design learning commons. You put the sofas, you put cozy area, which is, of course, completely relevant, but it's not enough. And I remember that library director told me, John, if now you and me, we sit down on the floor and we open our laptop and we begin to work together, we are creating a learning commons. And that's provocative, but it's pretty interesting. It's not the place that is defining the learning space. It's not the location, it's not the facility that is defining the learning space. It's the activity that we're conducting inside that is defining the learning space. And that brings me to my second comment. I remember that a few years ago, I was visiting an active learning classroom that was built in a very flexible configuration, so movable tables, movable chairs. And I was discussing that with the project manager that was very enthusiastic, of course. And after that, I said, I would like to discuss with faculties. And many faculties told me about the way they use that space. Okay, we do this, we do that. And I say, so do you move the tables and the chairs? And they told me, no. So it's movable, but it doesn't move. And so the next question was why? And they said that because basically nobody explained us what was the benefit for our teaching practice to move the tables. So there was a lack of faculty development. So the potential of the space wasn't translated in practice. And that brings me to the answer I would like to give to Ms. Wang. I think that a learning space design has to be based on the forecast of the uses that we want to conduct inside. And it's not the uses that has to be translated from the design. And this is a mistake that I see too many times, that, okay, we have a lot of ambitions in the architecture point of view. We're going to put digital features and many, many things. But basically, did you ask the opinion of the students? No. Did you ask what the teachers may do in such kind of space? No. We will see that later. But no, actually, we should see that prior the design, because the design must be translated from the expected practices and not the opposite. And I think this is a key thing to make those spaces sustainable.
Great, thank you. And let's move on to the last questions, and I think maybe it's the last one. So it's from one sensei again, in addition to Shibukawa-san's second question. Well, it's long, so let me just quickly summarize. So basically, her questions, one point she's making is online education still being regarded as a second-class citizen in higher education. So that's first one. And she also mentioning about this case in Singapore where online distance education qualifications are not admitted by government companies, something like that. I think it's, well, even I remember the United States, like when University of Phoenix, the online university, started emerging, that was a view, of the society. The online university, online degrees, that's not the real one. But I think that's been largely shifted, and the people and now the top universities are providing online only course programs, degree bearing, some program. So that being changed, but it's more a societal kind of issues. How about in France?
I think that this might be
university. That's what you're doing. So this may be a stupid question from me to you.
No, it's not stupid. It's not stupid at all. But I do think that there is a shifting in the mindset of people regarding this, and because of the COVID time, we didn't have choice since 1 year. We didn't have choice, and finally, one of the outcome I can see, and it's maybe a nice way to finish the discussion of today, is that first, everybody was considering online learning just as a plan B because we couldn't conduct face-to-face activities. But I do think that thanks to faculty development first, and thanks to scenario in which we could blend efficient online teaching with an efficient use of learning spaces, physical learning spaces, it gives a sort of legitimacy to the online part that they didn't have before, definitely. And when I'm discussing with my colleagues, I'm having a lot of discussions with the people coming to my faculty development session, and really, I do think even for the most conservatives of them, that there is a shift in the mindset saying, okay, finally, maybe online learning is not something that is undergrade or underrated learning. It might be legitimate as well. But once again, it needs a lot of faculty development, and it needs to have this forecast of hybrid configurations that are relevant between the online part and the face-to-face part. But I'm honestly, I try to be optimistic about that.
Yeah, and again, I'm not defending on behalf of Monkasho, some next. But one big concern in Japan is since so many universities, so many faculty members have been forced to teach online. And for many of them, this is the first time in doing this, and not a lot of preparations and no time being given. So we cannot claim all the online teaching, done over the last several months in Japan or by Japanese universities and Japanese faculty members are not the top grade or well designed. So in terms of the quality, again, under, the COVID over the last several months, we cannot say, well, we've tried hard, but maybe there are a lot of online courses, still not as good quality as their regular face-to-face, So that will be, changing over time, hopefully soon. Once faculty members are getting used to some teaching online or using hybrid, some mode. But that kind of a quality assurance issue is really huge. It's a big one. So, and I actually realized one son is turned on her camera. So, do you want to say something? No? Okay. Just want to show your commitment, for participation. So, thank you. So, Augeri Sensei, we're getting to the kind of closing, some time. Any final thoughts or encouragement, for those, and then thank you for all the participants to join, this 2-hour, long session. But for them, Augeri Sensei, you have any encouragement or last kind of thoughts? Please share.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. So first, I put in my email address. So if any of you want to extend that discussion, I'm always happy to. To visit colleagues and to have such discussions. So feel free to contact me. And my last word would be that I think that if all of us are attending that workshop this morning, is that we are sensitive to the renovation of teaching and learning practices. And once again, COVID time has been very, very difficult for many of us. But if there is one good outcome, is that it's never been a best opportunity to have this renovation of the teaching and learning practices that we were expecting for years. And now, thanks to those dramatic events, we have the door open. So I think we have to seize this opportunity for the future, definitely.
Thank you. I cannot agree more. So again, thank you so much. Well, I've never tried this, but now everybody can turn on your microphone and then let Augeri Sensei hear your hand clapping. To share the appreciation of, that's good. It's kind of working. But of course, so thank you so much, Augeri Sensei. And looking forward to our continuing joint activities and collaboration. So, thank you, everybody, for joining.
Merci beaucoup. Have a nice day.